robot rights. Have you ever thought
Yeah.
about that? Like robots having rights?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like straight out of science fiction, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. It's interesting, though, because,
Yeah.
this is something we're going to have to
Yeah.
grapple with.
It is. And today we're taking a deep dive into this really fascinating ethical question, all thanks to futurist Thomas Frey and his article, Should Robots Have the Right to Defend Themselves?
Oh, interesting.
So we're gonna unpack whether machines should be allowed to, protect themselves,
Yeah.
and even what happens if they do.
Well, it's interesting because the article, what it really kind of highlights is that this isn't about robots suddenly becoming,
Yeah.
sentient and demanding rights. It's more of a practical consideration for a future where robots are just increasingly integrated into our lives. I mean, you can already see that happening now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this raises some pretty important questions about how we design them, to interact with us, but also their environment.
Yeah.
Like, how do they navigate a world
Exactly.
that's designed for humans?
Exactly. So, just to give you a very concrete example, think about a self-driving car.
Oh, okay.
Right? It encounters a sudden hazard. Let's say a child runs out into the street. Should its programming allow it to swerve? Maybe even if that means damaging itself
Okay.
to avoid an accident. You see, that kind of self-preservation instinct is what we're really considering here today.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know, when we think about robots, you think about Asimov's laws of robotics, right?
Right. Absolutely. And those classic rules about robots not harming humans and, obeying orders and all that stuff. But honestly, those were really conceived in the realm of fiction,
Yeah.
Reality's a lot messier.
It is, yeah. There are a lot more gray areas than...
Way more gray areas.
Wait.
And just to give you another example, imagine a robot programmed to care for an elderly person, right?
Yeah.
Let's say the robot's blocked by a fallen bookcase. Should it be able to move that bookcase, even if that means violating the rule about damaging property?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see, situations like that really demonstrate why this whole debate goes way beyond just simple pre-programmed rules.
So that's such a powerful example, and I think it really illustrates why we're having this conversation today. So let's get into the arguments for why we should give robots this right to defend themselves. What makes it such a good idea, aside from what you just talked about?
Well, the main argument centers around protecting valuable assets. We're talking about robots that are super expensive to repair or replace.
Yeah.
Or, robots that are performing dangerous tasks like bomb disposal or working in radioactive environments. Or even, those robots that are designed to provide care for the elderly or people with disabilities.
Right, because they're providing essential services.
Exactly. And allowing those robots a degree of self-defense could dramatically improve efficiency and effectiveness.
Meaning they could complete their tasks without, unnecessary damage or delays. And I think Frey even mentions a robot firefighter.
Oh, yeah. That's a great example. So a robot that's programmed to, extinguish fires could theoretically push a human out of the path of, let's say, a falling beam, right? Even if it meant damaging its own, chassis. That kind of split-second decision, made possible by a self-defense protocol, could literally be the difference between life and death.
It's almost like giving them a sense of self-preservation.
Yeah.
Like a basic instinct to protect themselves so they can protect others. But I do wonder about the other side of the coin, What are some of the concerns or potential downsides to giving robots this right?
Well, for one, some argue that allowing these self-defense mechanisms could actually escalate situations rather than de-escalate them. Imagine a robot misinterpreting, a playful gesture from a human as an attack, and then responding with force.
Oh, that's a scary thought. Yeah.
Right. And then there's the whole question of how we ensure that these self-defense actions are truly a last resort. Used only when it's absolutely necessary.
And that really makes me think about all the potential biases that could be programmed into these robots, even unintentionally,
Yeah.
How do we guarantee that these systems are fair and equitable in their application of force? I mean, that's a huge concern.
It is, and it's where the real challenge lies. We need to make sure that any self-defense protocols are designed with, incredibly rigorous safeguards and constant oversight. And we need to address any potential biases in their algorithms right from the start.
Because otherwise, you're basically embedding our own human biases into these machines.
Precisely. And that could have, really unpredictable and potentially harmful consequences.
So this isn't just a conversation about robots, is it? It's about us.
It really is.
It's about how we define responsibility in a world where machines are making life or death decisions. And it's about confronting our own values and biases.
Right. Because as robots take on these more complex roles, the lines between tool and entity, they really do start to blur. And we need to grapple with questions about legal accountability, about ethical programming, and even, dare I say, the very definition of consciousness.
It's mind-blowing when you really stop and think about it. Like, what does it mean to create machines that can act autonomously,
Yeah.
even violently? And what rights and responsibilities come along with that?
Wow, this has definitely given me a lot to think about. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here.
We have.
And there's so much more to explore, like, the potential for robots to be abused.
Oh, absolutely.
And whether self-defense could actually play a role in preventing that.
That's a whole other layer to this, isn't it?
It is. It's fascinating, but it's also a little bit unsettling. I mean, where do you stand on all of this? Do you think we're headed toward a future where robots deserve the right to defend themselves? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't think there's an easy answer. But what I do know is that it's a question we can't afford to ignore. We need to have these conversations now while we're still in the early stages of developing these technologies, because the choices we make today are going to shape the world of tomorrow. And who knows, maybe that world will include robots with rights.
Well, that's a thought-provoking note to end on. And it's a conversation I hope our listeners will continue. So what do you think? Are we on the path to robot rights? And what does that future look like to you? Let us know in the comments.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.